Hello and welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have interesting strangers on every single week. Today I have Kate Kelly coming from Tennessee, Nashville, right? Tennessee?
Yes. Yes.
And we were just briefly talking about how it is down there. But before we get into all that, can you sort of introduce yourself, what you do, what you're, I guess, best known for?
Sure. So I'm Kate Kelly. I'm a singer-songwriter here in Nashville, and I write songs for myself and for other people too, and just am a music maker and touring artist. So that's what I do.
Yeah. And you're from Alabama, right?
Yeah, I'm from the Gulf Coast. So I'm from Mobile, Alabama.
I've been there twice.
Really?
Yeah.
What brought you down there?
Both of my sisters were in junior miss, or I think it's called distinguished young women now.
Yes, I actually know of that. Yes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we went down there twice during the summer, which is like insanely hot. But yeah, so I've been there twice, actually.
Cool. Yeah, I grew up doing a lot of stuff on the water there. For anyone who doesn't know, Mobile's right, on the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of get out in nature and kind of be amongst all sorts of different types of wildlife down there. So that's kind of what my fondest memories of growing up in Mobile are.
Did you like it, though? Did you like growing up there?
Yeah, I think I had a great experience. I happen to have really supportive parents and kind of come from a really open-minded family. And so I really enjoyed kind of the family aspects and our community aspects, but culturally, like as an artist and as a musician, like there aren't as many opportunities it's just kind of a different way of life down there. And living in Nashville, it's a little bit more progressive, a little bit more my style. So I'm happy that I've found my way here. But it was a beautiful place to grow up. And I don't really have any regrets.
Yeah. So when you were down there, is that when you first started? Are your parents like very musical people? Like, are they writing songs and things like that? Or
no, I would say my parents are pretty artistic. So, my mom's a visual artist. She's no longer really a practicing visual artist, but she's more of an art curator now. She owns an art gallery in Mobile called Sophiella Gallery.
Oh, cool.
My dad is like an entrepreneur type, but he has always played music, played guitar and sang and stuff like that. So growing up, my dad was musical and, he would play us music as we were going to sleep and that kind of stuff, which was super sweet. But also, my parents just had great taste in music, and music and the arts were just like a big part of our household and big part of my upbringing. So like pursuing the arts was something that was really encouraged.
Yeah, that's good, because I've talked to a lot of people where, they have parents that are like, it's not practical to do that, or it's not a good idea. Like, it's nice to hear that you had supportive parents. Yeah.
And I got lucky. Like, I felt like my mom, being a visual artist, was very supportive. But then also my dad had lots of different job situations. He was in the Air Force for a while, and then he took over like our family's business. And there were times of his life where I felt like he wasn't very happy in the jobs that he was working. And he always said, like, Kate, go after what you want in life. And if you can't do it for you, please just do it for me. Because some people don't have the privilege and don't have the ability to, go after what they want. And so yeah, I'm very, very blessed in that way that I had a lot of support.
You said your dad was in the Air Force?
Yes, he was for like 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a fighter pilot. He flew F-16s during the Gulf War. Yeah.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, I think it was very intense. And so after like 10 years, I think he had kind of gotten his fill and wanted to kind of take a different route.
Yeah. Yeah. How did your family end up in Mobile? Are you from generations there, or is it just you moved there for something, or they moved there?
Yeah, my dad's from New Orleans and my mom's from DC, or the DC area. And basically my dad had some family that was in the Mobile area, and basically his dad had a family business, and the family business was based in Mobile at the time. And so after the Air Force, my dad kind of saw a window of opportunity for that business and ended up buying that business. And so that's how we wound up in Mobile. But yeah, my parents aren't from there, so it wasn't kind of like generations after generation. Though a lot of people in Mobile, it is kind of like an old city in that way. It's kind of has a lot of like old family heritage, but we we found our roots, and we did really well considering. So
when you were growing up there, what sort of music were you writing music? Can you remember like the first song that you wrote, like, or that you performed for somebody?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like my parents like were very open to having music just playing all the time. And I started doing music lessons like as a, I don't know, 7 or 8 year old. So I was always very interested in music, though I wasn't like as interested in the like assignments that I would get. I was more interested in creating things. I really loved improvising and, yeah, but it wasn't really until I got my first guitar and found guitar that I really got into writing songs. And so basically I felt like when I got my first guitar, like, and started playing it, I was like 13 or 14. So I was a little bit older. And I just remember feeling like a different connection to the guitar. You know, you hold it so close to your body, you can kind of feel your heart against it. It feels like an extension of you when you play the guitar because you hold it so close. And I loved the fact that it was portable and I could play it, you know, I could stay up late at night and secretly be playing it, you know, that kind of thing. And so I think like, I guess around age 15 or something, Florence and the Machine had come out with this album. I think it was called Lungs. It was like very celestial and really, really, really beautiful. But she had a lot of metaphors of like the body and nature kind of playing into, you know, different metaphors of things she was going on in her life. So the first song that I wrote, it was called Going Native, and that has a whole nother meaning. Mm-hmm. But it was very kind of earthy and very emotional. I think like, you know, at the time when I was like in my teens, like, and I was having my first little bouts of, you know, feeling things deeply, the only way I really felt like I could express it was through my music. So it's kind of funny because my first few songs, I think, were quite emotional, quite sensitive.
Did you like cry during the?
Of course.
After you played
them? Of course. I was so emo. Yes, of course I was emotional during them. And I still am. I'm just like, and I know that that's like part of the territory of being an artist. It's just like feeling the world extremely deeply.
Yeah. I was going to say, because is there like, do you have recordings of those songs at all?
I do. And like sometimes when I look back at them, I'm like, damn, like this is actually pretty good. Like, you know, I don't mean to toot my own horn. Of course, it's like 13-year-old, 14-year-old me. But sometimes I look back and, you know, you expect those songs to be extremely cringeworthy. But there are certain little nuggets, you know, in there that I'm like, hey, that's not bad. You know, I saw what she was thinking of. I saw what she was getting after.
What doing there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny because I mean, I look at, you know, a lot of my past work. I'm a video producer, and like sometimes I look at the past work and I'm like, what was I doing? You know, like what was I thinking in that with that project? But when you were like writing these songs, and since you were sort of encouraged more by your parents to pursue this, was this something that like you always thought was attainable to like be an artist, or were there other things that you were like you wanted to do?
So when I was like in high school, I started going to a new music teacher, and I've struggled with mental health for kind of a long time. And so when I was like 15 or 16, I kind of was in my first bout of depression and anxiety. And I had a music teacher that just was so influential on my life. And she really encouraged me to just like forget all the rules of music I'd learned before and take this really like authentic improvisational approach. And basically, she kind of became my best friend. Her name was Angela Rayburn. And as I was having such a hard time in high school in those moments, I kind of went over to her house, and it was like this sanctuary for me. And so I'd bring over my journal entries, and we would kind of turn those journal entries into songs. And that's how I found songwriting. And so songwriting has always been like an enormous part of my life, and always been kind of like the thread work of my tapestry. It's always been a part of my world. It's always been something I wanted to weave into my life. But I also felt like a lot of the transformative benefits of music in my life, and I wanted to share that with people. So I actually studied and helped create a music therapy program at Belmont University here in Nashville. And I'm still a licensed music therapist, or a board certified music therapist rather. what that is it incorporates music into different therapeutic settings to help people cope with all sorts of things. I happen to be a mental health specialist, but I work with people with, all sorts of things: mood disorder, thought disorders, chemical dependencies, memory loss, all sorts of things. And that I do just part-time or a little fraction of my week, because mostly what I do is my singer-songwriter work. But yeah, to answer your question, I've always been interested in music and the power of using music to connect with people on a deep level. But it was always kind of between songwriting or music therapy. And there was a period of time where I was teeter-tottering back and forth. And then I kind of realized that we live in this culture that tells you that you have to be one thing. And we're actually like a lot of different things all at once. And that I can embrace like a lot of different parts of myself. And so, I'm in a phase now where I really do embrace the part of myself that wants to give and wants to share music with and share that connection and use it as a form of healing. But then also, use it as a form of healing in my own world. Yeah,
I think, with a lot of artists too, just generally speaking, you can get caught up a lot on like whether this is good or not,
yes.
in the judgment of like, oh, is this even good? Like, is this worth my time? And so I think, hearing you say you had someone that sort of didn't care about the quote unquote rules that existed is like really good for people, because a lot of people have trouble breaking down those walls.
Yes. And don't get me wrong. Like I still do like, and you talking about like looking back at your old video work and being like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Like I definitely have those moments, and that's something I have to, kind of work through all the time. And it's kind of like Joni Mitchell has this lyric. It says like songs are like tattoos. And I feel that way about my songs. Like at the time you might have thought that it was the coolest tattoo in the world. And then you look back on it a few years later and you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Yeah. But I think that kind of just comes with the territory, and it's definitely, I totally hear you. And I wasn't, trying to imply that like looking back on my older work as a 13-year-old, that it was just fabulous.
I was like a Mozart of
because
music.
That is not the case. That is not the case. I'm just saying that like, you can pick out little things that stand out that you can still resonate with. But I definitely.
Yeah. Everyone has to start somewhere,
Yes.
No one is great at the beginning of anything. Even the people that we claim are the best in their field, they started somewhere. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it is just persistence and just not giving up on it. It's like, any relationship that you have, like, even romantic relationships, it's about like working through difficult times and communicating and just continuing, like not giving up on it. And I feel like a relationship to your passion is the same way, just like communicating with it, seeing its needs, and not giving up on it. And I think that's where I am at too. It's like, as you look back on all the ways that you've made music or, created any form of art, it's just like, as much as we can get embarrassed about some of the things we made or choices we made, it does show like a commitment that you've had for, years and years, and a persistence, which is a really good feeling.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's like the biggest part. I feel like one of the biggest part of just like being successful at anything. There's like, I forget who said it, but there's like a saying of like the best like comedian ever is not a comedian, because like there's someone out there that has like the potential to be like the best comedian ever, but he decided not to pursue it or didn't care enough about it to like keep going. And so he's like doing something else, and I feel like it's such a major part of any sort of creative endeavor is that commitment and like willing to keep going.
Yes, that grit.
Yeah.
And I think like, at first, like when I struggled with different things in high school and then continued to, throughout my life, which is a totally human part of life. Like sometimes you think that those things are going to set you back, but I think in reality, they just give you grit. They just give you like kind of a little thing to keep working towards. And they can kind of color your journey in a really interesting way. So I'm thankful for that, because I think a lot of the things I've overcome have just helped me to want to keep persisting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you spoke a little bit about like mental health and mental illness. It's something that we have in common. I've had OCD for the majority of my life, and anxiety and panic disorders. Because for me, like at a very young age, OCD is like a really hard thing to get through because
oh my God, I know.
So confusing, and like no one really understands besides the people that are either going through it or therapists and stuff like that. But
I couldn't agree more. Just thank you for saying that, because it's so confusing. Yeah.
It's like, and then the repercussions of that confusion just affect you later on in life, you know? But how did you deal with that? Because for me, it was something that was like debilitating in my life, where it's like I couldn't even like concentrate because of like these intrusive thoughts and obsessive thoughts that were happening over and over again. So how did you overcome that, and how do you still do that to like concentrate, even to like write a song or something? Because I feel like that can be difficult.
Yeah. And I'll just kind of give like a little bit of an OCD overview just for listeners, because I feel like it's one of those disorders that's just like so misunderstood in our culture. But yeah, so for those listening who don't know about it, OCD is classified by intrusive thoughts or unwanted thoughts that you have over and over. And then compulsions are things that you do to try and get rid of those thoughts. Some common themes for people who don't know, you know, there are moral obsessions that people have, religious obsessions, contamination obsessions, health obsessions. I mean, it can range all sorts of things. Some people have thoughts of fears of harming themselves or harming others. For me, OCD, like, I think I've always had like a little OCD going on in my life. But I had a year where I continually got sick with strep throat, which I know seems totally random, but it actually kind of comes into play here. I continually got really, really sick, like 3 or 4 times with strep throat in a year. And I had a pretty serious trauma happen to me that same year. And on top of that, I graduated college. And so it was kind of like a lot of things at once happened. And I truly felt like a switch flip in my brain. Like I'd always had obsessive and anxious tendencies, but it was like I got sick. I can't really describe it any other way. And for me, it was classified with like a lot of intrusive thoughts on taboo themes, like a lot of just images and a lot of just what ifs, you know, about myself, about people I loved. But then, you know, because I was having a lot of health issues, I was having like a lot of health obsessions. It really just, it's so funny. Like I joke now that I feel like my OCD kind of went on tour. Like I got obsessions on all sorts of different things for a while there, but I was really lucky. You know, a lot of people with anxiety disorders and OCD specifically, because it is so confusing. Like you said, it typically takes people like years and years to get proper treatment. And I think that I got really lucky because I had gone to school for music therapy and I knew a lot of resources in town. I basically did go to a psychiatrist and I got diagnosed. He was like, oh, what you are having, these intrusive thoughts, is kind of classic OCD. And I think all of the misconceptions about it made me think that I was experiencing something else. I didn't know what was happening to me. For a while, I thought that I was really like losing my mind. I really didn't know what was happening to me, but I was lucky because I got, I found treatment at a place that offered cognitive behavioral therapy and a specific type called ERP, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's exposure response prevention, which basically for people with OCD, you expose yourself to your certain fears. You basically confront them and then learn how to sit with that anxiety. And research shows the more that you confront the things that you fear or almost welcome them into your life, initially your anxiety gets really high, but slowly you learn how to tolerate those thoughts, tolerate those things. And you end up kind of giving up your compulsions and just letting your thoughts just be thoughts. But so that helped me a ton. I think I've been a little bit more vocal about my mental health journey right now because I think, you know, with coronavirus and the pandemic, there's so many stressors right now. Like, I don't know about you, Sam, but I feel like certain days I'm just like, holy shit. Like, I don't know how people are doing this. Like, this is a hard time. Yeah. And I feel really lucky because I have a lot of tools in my therapy toolbox now. And I feel like I have a few years of recovery under my belt and things aren't as hard as they once were. And I feel like I'm a voice of someone that can say that it really does get better. And, yeah, I know that was a long-winded answer. No, but yeah, and focusing and writing songs and stuff like that, when I was like at my sickest with OCD, that did come in the way at times. And I felt just generally really distracted because there was a lot going on in my head. But nowadays I feel like mindfulness has been so helpful for me, just like focusing on the present moment and whatever the task is at hand and letting my thoughts come and go and not trying to react or judge them. And so I think that's really helped me with OCD. It's just not trying to get rid of the thoughts. You know, when you stop trying to get rid of them, typically they actually kind of reduce in frequency. So
right. It's like your own brain is like basically setting up roadblocks for you to, you know, there's always this like, especially I find with like anxiety and panic, at least from my experience, it's like you sort of talk about like sitting with the symptoms, and like a lot of anxiety too is like just knowing that you're not dying, basically, you know, like
I know.
And it's so hard to like jump that wall of like just allowing your body, like when you, like for instance, like when you have a panic attack or something, like just being like, okay, all right, this is happening. Like this is like, instead of being like, oh my God, this is over.
I have to get rid of this or whatever. Like, just letting yourself panic. It's really weird. Like it feels totally counterintuitive because like our instincts are saying like, you're in danger, like run or, you know, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. How have you been in that way? Have you gotten the help that you've needed on those accounts, you know?
Yeah, it's been a long road for me for sure. And it's still something obviously that I'm working on.
And me too.
But I'm loads better now as a 29-year-old than I was even in college. But yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing was like, you sort of look at least for me personally, mental health. I was basically like doing nothing for a really long time, you know, and just letting it like take its course, which is funny because like I was so ready to be like, I just want this to be over. Like, can someone make this stop? And you're not willing to like put in like the commitment of like in knowledge of knowing it takes years and years to get to a better place. And like,
it absolutely does.
And it takes like, it takes a lot of time. And I think I was one of the people that was like, because, you know, I had gone to the hospital for like panic attacks and stuff like that. I'm just like, can this be done tomorrow? Like, I don't want to like work for years and struggle to like,
oh my God, yes,
sort of be in a little bit better place. But like, that's what you have to do. It's like a long-term commitment. It's not like, you know, a short sprint. It's a marathon for sure. And I think once you understand that and sort of realize that, it's not going to be better tomorrow, but doing like eating healthier and meditating and like going to therapy, like all of that will help you 2 years down the road. That's been a helpful realization.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, I describe it like a radio. Like there was a time where there was this buzzy, loud radio in my mind that was like really effing loud. And it was just like, those were my intrusive thoughts and my obsessions. Like, and they used to be really loud. And now I feel like the more therapy I've done, and again, meditation, like you're saying, exercise, eating right, just trying to like take care of myself. It's like the radio just turned down a little bit. And the more work that I do, the more that radio stays pretty low in volume, you know? And sometimes like in stressful times, the radio cranks back up and I have a hard time like finding myself in it. And that's very real. But for the most part, like the radio is so much quieter than it once was. It used to be really debilitating. So
it's almost weird sometimes, you know? It's like, I feel like something should be going on.
I completely, you know? And I feel like that's like such an annoying OCD thing too. It's like you're finally feeling better, and then it's like, what's wrong?
It's like, wait, this
can't be right.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think about this situation now, and like when I was younger, I probably couldn't even have gone to a grocery store with this going on. You know what I mean? Like, and it's those little things, those little victories of like being able to do things that you definitely were not able to do before.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point.
But yeah, it's been a journey for sure, and it continues to be. But so with all that, did you end up writing a lot of music based on sort of your like struggles with mental health? Did that come up a lot even in your early work?
I think so. Like I've always used songs as kind of a healing mechanism. Like for me, things that inspire songs it's not just things going on in my life, but you know, sometimes it is like something that I'm struggling with, or I'm really inspired by visual art and books and nature. So like those all come into play in my music. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Like when I wrote The Wonder of It All, which I released in 2018, that's a record of mine. I felt like those were almost remedies. Like I was feeling actually so bad at that time in my life that I felt like I wanted a record that I could just like dance and sing along to. Like I was almost like,
it's like the opposite.
It really was the opposite, Sam. I was like, I'm just going to try and write something that is so feel good, because that's like, that was like my self-healing remedy at the time. Like I just desperately needed that. And it's interesting because now I'm in a much better place mentally, but I almost feel like I have the mental space to write about some of my harder times.
Sure.
So this record that I'm recording right now kind of mentions some of the harder things that I went through and some of the struggles I had with mental health, which is kind of interesting because I think sometimes when you're in it, writing about it almost seems like too much, or at least for me. Like at the time when I was in it, it was so tender and sensitive that I don't know, I just had to write something silly.
You need to like get some space, and like reflect. Yeah.
So now I'm generally much happier than I was, but I'm like, now I can get into the dark stuff because I actually have the space to mentally.
Yeah.
So I always try, like, as an artist to be as honest as possible. I just think honesty works in connecting with people. And even as a music therapist and a singer-songwriter, like, that's really what I feel like my calling is just to connect to people deeply through music. And so the more honest I can be with myself, I feel like the more you can connect to someone just because you're just being human together. Like one thing as a musician that I'm really trying to work on, like with the new music that I'm making, is just doing it because I like it, not like thinking of like, how it's going to be received. I think that we can get into this like completely neurotic space of like, well, are other people going to like it? And then we lose the message like entirely.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to be like, it almost sounds selfish, but I'm trying to like do it for me right now because I know that like if I am as true to my own values and as true to my story, that like it actually can give more once I, put it out into the world.
Yeah.
Just because I think, you can tell when something comes easily to an artist. Like some of the best records, like you can tell, like, wow, I don't think they thought that hard on that. I think they just did it. They weren't like mulling over how it was going to be received. And so I think I also have to set some boundaries, like with social media and even just like on Spotify, like looking at streams and all of that. Like I think, you have to be very careful with the numbers and making meaning with, the numbers that surround us and finding like your true value and things that actually make you tick.
Right. Yeah. Cause it gets really tough, if it's hard to get away from it. But like so many people are so, and not just social media wise, but the numbers, like their plays or like their downloads or whatever. It's so reflective on like how they feel that day. It's like who they are, instead of what they do.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting that you say that. During this like quarantine time and I've lost a lot of work and then I've gotten work in other places and all sorts of stuff. But for a while there, like I realized that I'm such a freaking achievement junkie. Like my achievements and like what I marked off on my list of things to do were like a real measuring stick for who I thought that I was. And I realized during quarantine, like how problematic that was, because there were days where like, as a musician, a lot of the work that I do is like gig work and, I can't do a lot of that. And so there were certain days where I went from having a lot on the books to having almost nothing, and realizing like what gives me self-worth beyond my achievements too. It's just been like a whole period of self-discovery in that way. What about you as a videographer and stuff like that? How has this time been for you in that way?
Well, I mean, it's been interesting. I was working full time. I got laid off like a month ago. So it's been weird. I think I was talking to my fiance about this yesterday. In like the whole pandemic in general, it's like we've basically been going through this since March, and that's only been 5 months, and we got another at least 6 ahead of us of life like this. So we're not even halfway through, really. The job, like finding jobs, has been okay. It hasn't been as scary as I thought it would be, but I think it's more just I'm a very what's the word? Introvert. There we go. I can't believe I couldn't think of an introvert. But,
that's okay.
I'm very introverted. So I like being by myself. I like sort of having time and space to like think and so this time hasn't been that different from what I truly like to do, really.
Yeah, like maybe you've had more time to focus on, the podcast and focus on, things that you want to spend more time doing. I know for me, like I've been writing so much music, and like I used to be so intimidated by like recording stuff, and I don't know, I feel like I had to overcome some stuff that I don't know many women producers, like people that record music, and I know that there are some out there and I need to connect with them, but I always felt like, I don't know, I didn't feel empowered to like record my own music and to be a producer and that kind of stuff. And I certainly wouldn't call myself a producer yet, but I'm dabbling in like recording my own music right now and really like busting my chops when it comes to recording stuff. And I think this time I feel really lucky that I've had this time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically forcing people to get outside of their box, and try new things.
No doubt.
And not be. It's funny because I feel like a lot of people are afraid to fail, and that's a common thread. And what this has done, it seems like, is make everyone go inside. So at least you're failing not in front of anyone, only by yourself. So like, I feel like a lot more people are willing to sort of stretch themselves and try new things because you're alone or by yourself a lot of the time. So there's no one else to judge you for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's so true. And I also feel like that feeling you're saying, like, about kind of feeling like you're failing a little bit, like, but no one's really seeing. Right. I have noticed, like, even within like some of my closest friends, we've been so much more open. Like if we're having like a shitty day or something, by the way, am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah, you can swear. This? Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, sorry. But like, if someone's having a shitty day, like people are just more open to it. Cause I think like, I don't know. I just have noticed like a little bit more openness and vulnerability amongst people. Like I feel like even family members like are more open to saying like, I'm having a hard time today. Cause like everyone's having a hard time. And I think there's a part of that feels kind of like a relief. Like we don't have to hide, we can be open and honest that this is challenging.
Yeah, which is good. I wish people would just be more honest and open and share more,
I know. I agree. And I think again, that's kind of like where I come from with my songs, especially this new batch that I'm recording right now. I think like openness is contagious. Like, you sharing with me like, hey, I've struggled with these things made me want to be open about it, and I just think that stuff is contagious and you might as well just try and spread it.
No, for sure. Yeah, because I come from a childhood of like the very opposite, where I felt like I was struggling through all this stuff, but I had nobody to talk to, about it. And so like I didn't really talk about any sort of mental health stuff until I was in college, Yeah. And so like 7 or 8 years of my life, I just was holding it all in basically.
Yeah.
And so I feel like taking that first step is really tough, and like being open and honest. And it's almost like you got to pick someone really well to like do it for, because it can be like heartbreaking if you open up to someone and they just like shut you down. And that's your initial interaction.
Oh my God. I know. It can be so damaging.
So you really got to like pick someone well. But yeah, so I felt like once I opened up, it was like, well, I mean, there's tons of people that are dealing with this. I mean, it sucks, but it's not as big of a deal as I thought it was.
Yeah, it's like it's you normalized it for yourself, know, and I think that's what was so hard for me. Like I went through a similar thing too. Like there was a long time that I was holding it in, even though I probably did have plenty of people I could talk to about it. I felt so ashamed, that I held it in for a while, but. Anyway, yeah, it's like I think it's problematic when you think it is a catastrophe, but when you're holding it in, it feels like it's a catastrophe. It's like the second you start empathizing with people and getting it out of your system, it makes it less of a big deal, which is helpful.
Yeah. So what like we're talking about sort of music in the pandemic right now, you were planning a tour, or had the date set. How did that go over, and like how did you deal with like basically your whole tour getting canceled?
Well, it was a bummer because I had taken like a lot of the end of 2019 and early 2020 to work on writing a huge new batch of songs and kind of do some networking in Nashville, which I did get to do, but I was really excited to hit the road again. It's something that I always really look forward to, especially I've put in like several months of hard work towards a new album or whatever. So I was really bummed, but it was clearly not, safe to do.
Sure.
And yeah, I think I definitely went through like a period of denial. There was a time, like for some reason, I didn't delete my tour dates in my calendar. So like
it'll happen.
Each day that I was like sitting at home, I was like, damn it, I'm supposed to be in Chicago right now or whatever, But then there's a period where I was like, I have to delete these dates. I'm just like really in denial here.
Right.
But it's just opened up doors like for a while I was just seriously bummed and I didn't really even know what to do with myself for a second, at the beginning of all of this. But then I slowly settled into like kind of a new groove and a new routine. So yeah, I think it's been hard, but I also feel like I have good contacts with the people that, had booked me for the tour. And so I'm hoping that, when our world opens back up again, I can hit the road again and that, I'll have kind of a new batch of songs to bring with me.
Yeah. Are you going to release a new album anytime soon or?
Yeah. So I'm recording music with my fiance, Andy Kata, who plays in a few groups here in town and does his own music and is a composer and all sorts of stuff. And also a friend of mine, his name's Alex Tompkins, and he has a project here in Nashville too called Vampsy. So I'm recording with those two guys, and we have just been taking like most Fridays. We're kind of in like a little quarantine pod with each other. I, of course, live with Andy, my fiance,
Sure.
but Alex and I and, a couple other friends were kind of just isolated to just each other. And so I go over to Alex's almost every week and we work on kind of a new record. So we've done 3 songs out of like 7 or 8 so far. So I predict that it'll take like, I don't know, probably a few more months to get them done. And then,
Perfect
of course,
timing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I actually do feel like it is strangely good timing because I'll have this time to kind of get the artwork together. And, with releasing a record, so much more goes into it than just like the actual recording process. And so I think I'm excited to know that like probably by the time that I am able to release this record, like it might be, I'm guessing probably by like early 2021, I'll probably have it together and we'll start to make a release plan. But it's kind of exciting knowing that hopefully the coronavirus stuff might be.
Yeah, we might have a vaccine and everyone might be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I can drop a record and hit the road again, which would be really great.
Are these all songs that you have written recently or are they some like backlog ones too?
These are all songs that I've written recently. This year, I'm curious about if I could write really songs not just for myself but for other people. So that's what that means is like music publishing or writing for film and TV, that kind of stuff. I just love the process, and I'm curious about that one day as being like a full-time occupation alongside, touring and playing shows and all of that. So I kind of took this year to like write with as many people in Nashville as possible and write with myself as much as possible and really take time in carving that out. So I like logged like so many more songs than I ever had before. I think in making records in the past, like I might have 10 songs and I'll select 5 or whatever. But this time around, it's like I had 50 and I selected 6 or something like that.
Wow.
So I feel like I've gotten to know my sound so much better because I just wrote. And I think I have like less attachment with my songs right now, which I actually think is a really good thing because it's like, I think, if you have a lot of perfectionism going into a song, like you can get really blocked. Whereas if you're just writing all the time and it can be a throwaway song or you're not like putting the pressure on yourself to like write a hit. You're just trying you're just trying to understand your process and just like better your process. So, so these songs are all kind of recent songs, and I found myself like writing about some experiences from high school actually, and just kind of writing about growing up on the water. A couple of the songs are about that. And then I unfortunately lost a friend to suicide a couple years ago. And so I kind of like talked about that grief process as well. So it's kind of exactly what we were talking about. Like there's some uplifting songs on this newer record. There's some songs that are sad. There's some songs that are in between.
Sure.
And I think it's just me being in a place where like I can talk more openly about it. So I am. And I think that kind of comes like with really being in recovery and feeling like I'm at a safe enough place to explore all of that.
Yeah, definitely. So when you like come up with the titles for your albums, is there like a big thought? Because I always wondered, like, I feel like some people just are like, let's call it like Adele. Let's call it, what's my age right now? Okay, let's call it that. How do you sort of like think about like a collective project and like naming it? Because I feel like that has to be tough.
Yeah, it's funny. Like New Heartbeat, which is like my first EP, which I made in college. Like it's so funny. I made it with my friend Patrick Seawalk, who is a great musician and producer. But we were in college and we were like interning at different places at the time, and he was interning at the studio, and the studio said like, hey, like after hours you're allowed to use the studio. So we recorded like my first record at like 2 a.m. most nights. We were really tired. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so New Heartbeat, I just named it after the track that I liked most. But with The Wonder of It All, my first full-length record, it was really interesting. I think that I was on a long run one day. I'm a runner and just kind of a nature freak. And I was just out in nature for a while and going on a long run. And I came back and like I opened my journal and I just wrote down the wonder of it all. And like I knew I had kind of an intuitive moment where I just felt like that day I was inspired kind of by the awe and wonder of life. And the whole album was kind of an album about that. Like I was in such a dark space mentally, but I was writing just about like life's wonders for that album. So I just wrote down the wonder of it all. And then I drew a little moon because at the time I was kind of like, I had a really interesting view of the moon outside of my window, and I could see it kind of in lots of different phases, and I felt like that was so beautiful. So that kind of came like very intuitively for the wonder of it all. But and then I also ended up incorporating the lines, the wonder of it all, into one of my songs. So the song Child Inside has the words deepen the wonder of it all throughout it. Yeah, but for this newest one, it's funny that you mentioned that, because like this week I've kind of been thinking about like what the new collection will be called. And I honestly have no idea, but I kind of trust that like if I stay in tune with what's going on with me, and if I look at all of the songs as a whole, sometimes like you'll get the bigger picture. And right now, because we only have 3 out of like 7 or 8 done, I feel like I'm not getting the whole picture yet. Whereas when I got the idea for the wonder of it all, everything was almost done and wrapped up, you know?
Yeah,
so we'll see. I think it's different every time. I don't know that I'll ever like have a self-titled album just called Kate Kelly, because it kind of goes back to the tattoo thing. It's like, I don't know if I could ever just define myself by one thing. And by the way, I don't mean to hate on tattoos in any way. I love tattoos.
Suck!
No, I love tattoos. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying it's like the permanence of naming a record Kate Kelly sounds really kind of scary.
But it's also hard to find. Kate Kelly would be hard to find, probably.
Yes,
an album.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. There's been some difficulty because there's actually another singer-songwriter named Kate Kelly that does like electronic Christmas music.
Oh, that's pretty tight, actually. That's pretty tight. Maybe you should weasel your way into that market.
Yeah, exactly.
Electronic Christmas music only?
It's like, I don't want to say, I think it has like a heavy electronic kind of pop influence.
But is it only Christmas music, though?
Yes, it's only Christmas music.
It's like Michael Bublé. It only comes out once a year and then goes back
and of
into
course, this is like happens to like almost every independent artist. This happens all the time. But of course, when it happened to me, I was so embarrassed. Like one of my first releases, like my song didn't come out on me, Kate Kelly's page, but the Christmas
awesome.
Kate Kelly's page.
You gave her some new music.
I was so embarrassed, and I contacted Spotify. I was like, "Help! Transfer this immediately." It ended up working out, but
with this new music and what you're coming out with now, and I always wonder this generally, you sort of talked about having a distance from the songs. Are there certain songs though that you write that you care about more, like than other ones? there has to be some difference between like a song that you write more personally about your experience than a song you sort of write for fun.
Yeah, totally. I always like the ones that are just like heartbreakers. Like that goes back to
cry.
Yeah, that goes back to me being just like so emotional.
Yeah.
But I just like songs that like I have a few songs that always just like they feel more timeless. Like my song "Child Inside," like it's one of my favorite songs to play live. It just like really reflects on a lot of different aspects from my childhood and honest moments from like present day. And I think when I wrote it, like I just felt really aligned with what I wanted it to be about, you know? And so I don't know, it means a lot to me. And songs are so interesting. Like they kind of just, they can come to you in the strangest moments. Like all of a sudden when you're taking a shower, like you have to hop out really quick and jot it down or whatever, you know, or sometimes like you have to like just knuckle through them. Like you're just like, oh my God, I can't figure out this song. And they come in such different ways. And so I think they influence, you know, how you care about them. But I think, I'm not exactly sure why, but some songs do, I hear about them all so much, but some feel more timeless than others, and some feel like I still feel the exact same way.
Sure.
And I'm really thankful for those because they kind of, they outlast any phase I was going through. You know, they're just, they feel true to just me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, I feel like as a person who consumes music and like is a fan of artists and stuff, and like, you can connect with a song as like an audience member that the artist maybe didn't even really care about that much. You know?
I
or
find
vice
that
versa.
so interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird
know.
thing.
I have this book called Songwriters on Songwriting, and it interviews like all sorts of songwriters, really a lot of like the most famous kind of folk and rock and roll songwriters from the 60s through the 80s. But you know, so many different people have different writing processes, and like some people, like, you know, Tom Petty talks about a couple songs in the book that he thought were just total throwaways that were like the best songs of his life, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And, or, you know, there's some people that like, you know, David Byrne of the Talking Heads is featured in there, and he's really improvised. Like everything that he does is like free association. So the whole thing for him is like not to get too attached. Whereas other people, like Carole King in the book, talks about like how some songs like you just have to like work with and work with and work with day after day, and that's how you can create more meaning with them. So it's interesting because each song is different. And then each person in relation to each song is different.
Right.
So I'm so into the songwriting process. I think it's just like a fascinating thing that I get to be a part of. And yeah, I'm really thankful that I found it, you know, when I was a teenager, because it's helped me so much in my life.
No, yeah. It is interesting though, because you talk about like Tom Petty, like some of the songs he was like, oh, they're throwaway songs, or some of like his biggest hits. It would be interesting, like, to know what would happen if like he did throw away those songs and they weren't around.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, Sam, because I was listening to this podcast that Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell do. I don't know why, but I'm like blanking.
That's a powerhouse.
It's a really interesting, I want to say it's called Off the Record or something like that. I really should know it better. But anyway, they were talking about Tom Petty specifically, and they were talking about his album Wildflowers and how Wildflowers was like such a unique album for XYZ reasons, but basically that there's like a Wildflowers B-sides basically that was never released, that's like still kind of in Tom Petty's catalog, and right before he passed away apparently they were going to release it, and it's just never been released. So I think about that too, like what are all the songs, like I have plenty of songs that are just, I call them journal songs, that like they just stay in my journal and that's where they're going to live their lives. Right. But I think about that for some of the greats, like what about these incredible songwriters, like what were we missing from that second Wildflowers album, you know? Right.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, you look at bands that are like, that people will classify as like one hit wonders, you know, and they found success that one time with that one song, but were never able to duplicate it to that level again. I always find that really interesting, is like, I feel like there has to be, you know, obviously there's like heartfelt and emotional reasons that you write a song, but there also, I feel like, is a little bit of strategy too to songwriting. And
yes,
it's weird that once you find a sort of successful way to do it, that you can't make it again in any other form. It's weird.
Yeah, I think like it's always the thing about it. It's kind of like yoga and how they say, you know, yoga's a practice and like you'll never be done practicing.
Right.
I kind of feel the same way about songwriting. Like there's never going to be a time where like you finally are done or you figured it out. It's like that's what's beautiful about it. Is like you just have to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that always blew my mind. That like.
I know.
There are bands that like tour, like Edwin McCain. Is that the guy who sings "I'll Be"?
Oh yes, that was definitely.
I'll be your cry. That guy. He had one song. That was it, and then nothing else. It's like
what's on your set list?
It's like, but like, how did you do that? How did you create this one song that like was number one, and then you couldn't do it ever again? Like,
that would be so much pressure. It has to be pressure.
Maybe,
it's like, okay, I did this. Now I have to do it again, and maybe never measuring up to the amount of pressure that you're putting on yourself.
Maybe I'll Be 2. Like, I'll just like do a sequel to I'll Be.
Yes, like there's like, I'll just do 10 remixes.
Yeah, but I always found that really fascinating because then there's artists like, you know, obviously like some of the biggest artists in the world, like Ed Sheeran and stuff, who cannot stop putting out hits, you know, like it's just like everything he touches is apparently gold, you know? So
I know
there's a weird difference between like those two types of artists.
It is. It's very interesting. And I have certain friends in Nashville too, that I just feel like they're gifted with a certain touch that it's like everything they touch turns to gold. And it's really interesting. And so there are people like that. And there are people that like have a little bit of that and they're also at the right place at the right time. And then there are people that are chipping away at their sculpture every day like me. And I feel like there's beautiful things to learn about whatever scenario you're in.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And also just like to be happy with what you got. You know, it's awesome that you had a number that you are a one hit wonder. You had a hit. That's one more hit than like majority of anyone else has.
Yeah. And also like I feel this a lot, like living in Nashville, I have the unique experience of being able to like live a happy life, comfortable life as a musician.
Right.
And I don't know how many other places like you could really do that. And also on top of that, like it's so normal to just be writing songs all the time or calling up a friend and saying, hey, like, can I just run this by you? Like, so I feel really lucky in that way because, you know, it's like I said, it's like where I'm from. Like, I don't know a single songwriter where I'm from. Whereas here, even my primary care physician, like as I was getting a physical one time, was like, yeah, I used to be a songwriter.
Have you seen like, my latest record?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, you're my doctor. What?
Yeah. A weird conversation. You could take my new EP. It's out in the lobby.
Yeah, no, we're just like one of those things that was so Nashville that I almost found it annoying. Like sometimes when I meet someone with like a totally more normal job, like if I'll meet like an accountant or something, I'm like, thank God. Because everyone is a musician.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful thing. It's just
it sounds like
it's
a comedy bit, you know?
Yes.
It's like, I'm an accountant. Oh, okay. Whew, thank goodness. Yeah, but I also am writing this song.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because when I do talk to people like that are like, you know, someone that I like help out I babysit for, he's like a corporate lawyer. And I'm like, that's fascinating. Like, but he's like, yes, I'm like, please tell me more. But it's just because I really am kind of in this bubble of musicians, which I absolutely adore. But it is funny that it really is. It's truly a bubble.
With all this stuff that's going to come out probably next year, where can people keep up with like what you're doing? Presumably you have a website and social media.
Yeah. I'm pretty active on my Instagram, which is just at Kate Kelly Music. My website is Kate Kelly Music. And then you can follow me on Spotify. You know, for independent artists, a follow on Spotify actually is extremely helpful. And that's something that it's like a one tiny act of kindness that can go a really long way with independent artists. So, if you want to follow me on Spotify, if you connect to what I do, that'd be great.
Yeah, Spotify is really helpful because that's how I found you. Like that's how
cool.
I found you in my recommended the Discover Weekly playlist.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's awesome. That makes me happy.
So it does help for sure.
Yeah, it does. It does. And that's one thing I do love about Spotify. There's a lot of kind of in the music community, like Spotify can kind of like get a bad rep because there's not much of the actual money that gets you know, to you as an artist, but that's kind of comes with the game a little bit. Yeah. But there's so many cool opportunities, like for if you know, like one week I got a bunch of clicks on a song, and then all of a sudden I started getting Discover Weekly, and then you know, and then I got introduced to you, and you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people on Spotify. Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Sam.